Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and we're here to talk about the offense from that very difficult first game loss to the Chiefs. Softening the blow is the great Sarah Ellison, who is here to join me and talk about this game. Sarah, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I almost called you Bobby. I'm so used to saying Bobby. I'm doing great, Ken. And you know, I always say to my family, football is not going to change. Once the game's over, my mood is not going to change, happier or sad. So I'm doing great. And there's a lot of good and a lot of missed opportunities where you can see where the Ravens can grow. A lot of good from that week one. It's a gut wrenching that, you know, a toe took the Ravens out of a potential win there. But boy, do you like the resolve that they showed and the fact that, you know, they can even get down there in a situation like that. So lots of stuff to improve upon and lots of good stuff to start.
Very impressive final drive there. Obviously, some big plays hurt the offense in this game. We can talk about that a little bit. The big fourth down play. I think it was more the play call than the going for it. The going for it, I'm completely okay with. I think against the Chiefs in particular, field position matters a lot less in terms of giving the ball at the 25 or giving the ball at the 50 or even your own 40. I don't think it matters nearly as much as it matters with an average team with an average quarterback where you got a really good chance to stop them between the 20 and the 40. With Mahomes, that's less likely because you're working with a lot of space and you really need to steal possessions. And steal possessions by taking risks on fourth down, and they did it, and it didn't work out that time. And then, of course, the sack fumble -6 for Rosengarten but for Jones, but allowed by Rosengarten was a big downer too in terms of one of the big plays of the game.
That's brutal. I'm pretty sure that was like his first NFL snap.
Yep,
the very first one. Mm-hmm. And what's brutal about it is they try to give him help with Fa'alele. And he made the mistake you can't make, which is letting Chris Jones beat him on the outside. Because if you're going to get beat on the inside where your guard is helping you in that gap, it's just I cannot believe that it happened. I don't know if it was jitters. I mean, what a tough assignment for sure. So you can give him grace there. But my goodness, he needed to be on the outside of Chris Jones' shoulder, not on the inside.
Yeah, he definitely he made the move. And I always talk about Daniel Fa'alele not using his arms very well, but he spiked out to try and take Chris Jones off his plan, but that was the end of him in terms of Jones swiped right by him.
He wasn't going to get there fast enough.
Yeah. It was a tough play, honestly. And, there'll be some steps of learning for Rosengarten. There were other things in this game that I think were positive for him, although it was not an overall good performance. And we'll get to the offensive line a little later, where I think, honestly, my overall feeling is I was fairly pleasantly surprised by what happened to the offensive line in this game. As much as, things were difficult in this game, the offensive line actually did some pretty good things.
Well, you and John Harbaugh might be on an island together because when he said after the game that, they answered a lot of questions and they had been doubted and they had played well. I mean, I was listening to it live on our show and I chuckled. I chuckled out loud. I do not feel the same way, although I will say I feel slightly better because some of the issues, especially down at the end, and I could be wrong, but it seemed like with the way Lamar, especially on that final drive where he missed, the throws and then got likely when Justice Hill was taking on Chris Jones, it seemed to me that Lamar put him in that pass protection. And I don't know why they had 5 defensive linemen on 3 guys and then Justice Hill on Chris Jones. And again, we could always be wrong, but the way the film looked to me, and I watched it with JT Sullivan at the QB school, it looked like Lamar put him in that pass protection, and it happened at least on the first time, but it happened twice in a row. And so if that's just a matter of like putting them better pass protection, because that's just a no-no to put Justice Hill on him. So in those cases, was it Lamar? Was it Monken? It looked like Lamar when he went to the line of scrimmage. I don't know. So that part, I had put on the offensive line, but maybe it's just the calls at the line of scrimmage. But to me, I didn't feel good coming out of that game about the offensive line. So we can dig into that.
We will go deep into that in the second part of this show. So I promise you that as well. And it's not like I think this was a great game from the offensive line. I just think there were some positives and I'm not going to discount them, but I think there were literally 5 penalties. All 5 penalties called on the offensive line were circumstances perhaps beyond the Ravens' control.
Right.
So we'll get into that.
There.
Yeah, a little bit. That was a lot of the negative scoring for the offensive line, but they also got bailed out by Lamar a lot in this one. One of the real nice things we talked about the penalties here, but the illegal formation fiasco to start the game. This crapola. I mean, Andy Reid really had it better when I don't have his exact quote, but I'm trying to quote him here. I'm glad Baltimore had the ball first so the officials could make their point.
Mm-hmm.
And it as my immediate reaction to it, boy, it sucks to get the ball first when they're deciding illegal formation is going to be a point of emphasis and they're going to call it, damn it, no matter what.
It's terrible. It's terrible of the league to do this. When you have the opposing coach saying, I'm glad I didn't have the ball first.
Yeah.
When you have, by the way, Jason Kelce, whose brother is on the offense, for the Kansas City Chiefs, and he goes on Twitter, and I have his quote. He says, I certainly get the frustration people have that Ronnie got called for a lot of frivolous stuff early and the Chiefs didn't. Like, he saw it too. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, I actually think, he goes, I thought live, he's like, maybe Ronnie was lined up wrong. And he's like, then I went back and looked at it, and he said, one of the last ones, his feet are even with the guards, but because he's upright, like the way he stands in his stance, because he's upright, it looked like he was for the back. And then JJ Watt says, all I want is consistency. Call it the same way for both teams and call it the same way throughout the entire game. That way, at least we understand what rules we're playing by on any given day. When you have unbiased, and you can say Jason would be biased for the Chiefs, and you got a coach who would be biased for the Chiefs when they're all calling it out, you got to stop with this point of emphasis stuff. Like, emphasize it, go to camp and emphasize it, but to do it that many times on an opening play, no, I think the league has a problem with it.
It was fairly absurd. And I will say this, at camp this year, they brought in Clete Blakeman to explain the kickoff rule to us. Then he spent days in practice with the Ravens officiating there to try and explain this new kickoff rule. Well, I'm not going to bash the heck out of Blakeman because he's a hell of an official, been around for a long time. He's an old school official who has a real job as a personal injury lawyer in Omaha during the week. And he then tries to be an official on the weekend. And they've tried, by the way, to change that and have professional officials. But he made the point it doesn't really necessarily work out. You're weeding out a bunch of people who are really good at what they do already if you try and create new professional officials at it. So I think I understand that point. But Blakeman came in and explained the kickoff rules. And literally, there were 20 of us in the room, and we must have come up with about 4 questions that he was really having difficulty answering. So did not really know the rule at that point. Including little things about, what if the ball bounces here? What if an up person touches the ball? Well, yes, that's that's going to end up being a 40-yard line play because the ball doesn't make the zone. But then after all this, they go in. They had the opportunity, I guess was what I'm saying, during that meeting, to have any point of emphasis explained thoroughly. And if they don't even have to do it to the press at that point, although they can, because I think that's a good idea, they're going to explain it to the press. They know, the teams know it's going to be enforced.
Yeah.
And if they had a chance, obviously, to talk with the players and say, look, point of emphasis this year, you'd be warned on that play. The next time you do it, it's going to be an illegal formation penalty. But I think Ronnie Stanley basically said, look, I've lined up this way my whole life, my whole career. I've lined up exactly like this in true pass sets. And you're telling me this is no longer good anymore? This is a pile of rubbish. I'll stand right here and I'll try to make you see it right the second time.
Right.
And then it happened a third time, and Harbaugh is like, tell Ronnie to move up. You could read his lips on the sideline.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I do believe Ronnie said this. They did not enforce it the way it was explained to him. So they obviously came and explained it to them and worked with them. And then he also said that maybe I need to go back and look. Quote: didn't he say he was not warned, even though you're supposed to get a warning?
Well, McCary Collinsworth claimed was warned. Okay, which I don't know. I didn't see
So it's
it
one
happen.
warning for the offensive line, not per player.
Well, no, because okay, here's the thing. It was on the second play of the game that Stanley got called for it. So presumably on the first play of the game, Stanley could have been warned. Okay. But so there would have been an opportunity to. And McCary got called a little bit later on the same drive, not until the fifth play, because boy, you need to have a couple plays off from penalties, right? But he was warned somewhere in there as well. And then they apparently had all the warnings the Ravens were going to get. And they started calling them for, two more in the game after that. Incredibly frustrating.
It's not only frustrating for the Ravens, that part is frustrating, but also as like a product. Like here we are coming for this rematch of the AFC Championship game. You have these two quarterbacks have 4 of the last 6 MVPs. It's like Thursday night, the whole world is watching. We just found out it was the record-setting viewership for the most people watching a kickoff ever, and you're going to start it with 3 illegal like these ticky-tack things that don't even really impact the play. Like, so you take it from a Ravens point of view, and then you just put it in a viewership product point of view. Like it's not a good way to go about it. I don't think. I think they need to figure out a different way to emphasize these things.
It was exceptionally bad. I thought from that perspective is a great point to make. I also thought that Ravens fans need to be a little more centered with regard to the false start calls against Taylor on the right side. And he's terrible. He commits penalties all the time, and basically he's doing it because he's cheating back out of his stance on pass sets to try and get going. Well, I'll remind the Ravens that 14 years ago, Michael Orr was at left tackle for the Ravens and was doing exactly the same thing. And the Steelers fans went ballistic about it. I mean, there's a line. I don't like this line in particular, but I'm going to mention it because I think the context is important here. But it's got a racist quote that I don't like in it. It's from the movie The Jerk from Steve Martin, and he starts off with, "I was born a poor black child." Okay, but the comment that was out on the Steelers boards that week was, "I was born a poor black child, so now I get to false start whenever I want." It was awful. But I timed him out in that game, and he had one that was 1 tick early, one that was 2 tick early, and then he had another one that was 7 ticks early. So that's 0.03, 0.06, and 0.23 seconds that all didn't get called against the Steelers. And Steelers fans were livid about it. Well, the Ravens, unfortunately, they had a guy who probably should have been called several times. It didn't happen. I guess it happened twice, but it didn't happen more than that. And that was unfortunate. It's just one of those things I would have preferred not to see happen. And I wonder if the fact that they'd had the illegal formation calls earlier, and that had already, soured people on the high penalty count from the game, didn't have any impact on them not calling those, which is really bad, because you would think, maybe on some level they want to even it up, but on another level they don't want to make this a flag fest, and they probably would have reduced the flags overall. But I'm fairly centered on that. Honestly, that didn't mean the game. Even the illegal formation penalties, I thought the good thing coming out of that first drive was the Ravens got off the deck with Justice Hill and got 2 big third down conversions.
I was going to say, what's crazy is the third downs on that first drive. Like you said, it didn't impact the game, and it didn't, but I think it's because the Ravens overcame it. Like all those negative plays, it was crazy. Like you had, he had the third down to Justice Hill for 18. By the way, Justice Hill, like super under the radar, underappreciated at this point. I thought he had a very good game.
Played more snaps than Derrick Henry in this game.
Played more snaps than Derrick Henry, and we can get into the reasons why for that in a minute, because I'm sure we're going to talk about the running backs and had the Derrick Henry usage and all that. But then you had the third down to Zay Flowers. By the way, that was a gorgeous play design, great drop back. I loved that. In fact, the play calling on the first drive, I loved so much about that. And then the third down and 1 where, they just kept getting out of third downs. And what's also crazy, Ken, is I was looking on PFF, they had the efficiency by down. And what's funny is it kept getting better the further. They didn't have very many fourth downs, but like first down wasn't great, but second down was a little bit better, than third down was amazing. Like it was in the green. And there was just something about the Ravens on third down on Thursday night where they just kept converting. They just kept figuring it out. And so I think they overcame. Like if they had started in the hole, and had to like because of those illegal formations, and then Chiefs went down and scored, like it could have been a repeat of the AFC Championship game where it was like a blowout, but because at least they got the first score and then it was answered, it was like it felt more even and the Ravens stay calmed. But I mean, if they went like a 3-and-out because of those illegal formations or something like that, then it would have impacted the game. It would have definitely set a tone for the game.
I'm going to say I think it did feel a lot like the AFC Championship game, not in terms of like the despair level, but in terms of the relative score level. After the first drive of the AFC Championship game, it was tied. After the first two drives of this game, it was tied. And from that point forward, and the order of scoring obviously was different to start the game. The Chiefs got a little bit of ahead. Then they got more than one score ahead. The Ravens had to really work to catch up. They got a touchdown to get back into it. They got a field goal in the AFC Championship to get back into it. They were a score down. They had a chance to get the ball back. And
in that sense, it was. I just don't feel like there was a panic like there was last time. I felt like the Ravens stayed calm longer.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And I think that's very reasonable. But I like the fact that the Ravens earned the chance for the last tying drive, because in the AFC Championship game, they didn't do that. They let Marquez MVS get behind the defense and convert a long third down play. And this one, Trenton Simpson came up and made a really nice play. It was in space. It's the kind of play Mahomes normally makes you pay on. Mm-hmm. And he came across, and that was one of the nice highlights among the inside linebackers. We talked about the defensive shows. I don't want to get into it too much. Mm-hmm. In a game where they weren't covering, Trenton Simpson made a couple nice plays to defend passes.
Very nice.
And even though he had not a great overall game, I think he's the replacement for Patrick Queen that I think the Ravens really want. So we'll see how they may not play it that way the whole year, but I'm at least optimistic about that going forward.
I won't comment more because this is offense, but I agree.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. I already commented and broke my rule. So the last game tying drive, driving down the field, I liked a lot of things about it. I like the fact that they got to the edge when they needed to. I like the fact that Likely and Lamar obviously have this connection, and we're seeing that play out. And the Chiefs didn't have any answer for it. No answer at all. It was like the Travis Kelce all of a sudden was a Raven with Likely being all over the field and getting 8 yards and out of bounds whenever he wants. I mean, that's if you ever played tabletop football as a kid and you're in the last 2 minutes, that's the play you need. You need the 10 yards out of bounds play as you move the ball up the field.
It reminded me, I said on my show, it reminded me of Flacco to Derek Mason.
Yes.
Like when it was like a 2-minute drill, you could do like a 8-yard out. Flacco could make that long throw over there. Mason would always get open for it, step right out of bounds, and you could just just keep repeating if you have, around 2 minutes. It reminded me of that Likely and Lamar was like that reliable in getting that play done.
Flacco to Bolden, against the Patriots, against the Steelers. I like them both, but I think they're both very good examples. So anyway, what was the other thing that I think was kind of nice about that was they really leaned in the fourth quarter on the gassed Kansas City defense. So they were tired as hell, 74-50 in snaps on the game. So they didn't have anything left. And you know what? There's a lot of people who tell you in the analytics community that there's no evidence that a big snap count differential favors the team who has more snaps. And all I'll say is it doesn't make any sense from a practical standpoint. But what is probably confusing the situation is there are countercurrents of causality involved. So there are reasons why you get more plays because you trail and you're taking chances and nickel and dime the ball down the field and doing all that obscure the fact that it's really much better to not have played as many snaps. So on defense, that is. And I think that Aaron Schatz has come on my show and actually said, oh no, they've looked at that and they've said it doesn't matter. They haven't studied it to a degree where they found what the root cause is or what the countercurrents are that are messing it up. But I cannot believe anybody who's actually played football in their life, and that doesn't really include me, but anybody who's played football in their life would say, yeah, I can play 75 or I can play 50 snaps. Doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, but I agree with you that the Kansas City Chiefs defensive line was absolutely gassed. Mm-hmm. And there was a general feeling that the offensive line kept getting better. And I think that might be part of it. I think that they just couldn't keep running after Lamar. I think Lamar wore him out with all those scrambles. He scrambled at an extremely high rate, which I'm sure we'll get to more when we get to the Lamar section. And as dominant as Chris Jones was, having to run it like Lamar moving up in the pocket. So Chris Jones follows him. Then Lamar moves back in the pocket and Chris Jones follows him. And he keeps like going back and forth. And at some point, Lamar's going to outlast defensive linemen.
Yeah, and especially Justice Hill was like was like a gnat to him, but actually was very effective. Even though he allowed the cone to be imperiled, which obviously that's not his fault having to block Chris Jones alone. But he did a great job of sticking with that block and not giving up on it.
Yeah, he was going back and forth right with him, and Lamar was helping him out. Like Lamar I think helped make Justice Hill look better. Yes.
Yeah. I agree on that. One of the big stories, of course, from the AFC Championship game was the Ravens did not stick with the run. We did not see much of Derrick Henry in this game. And
right. Which is crazy because we started off, with, 5 carries on the first drive. He punches it in for the touchdown. And you're like, this is what we all wanted to see. This is what we wanted to see. And we loved that on that drive. And it was obviously, I think, a scripted opening drive, despite the penalties. And there was so much I loved about it, but you had 5 times with Derrick Henry, which set up some play action. It set up some reads for Lamar to have his own quarterback runs where he wasn't like hit at all. I think he had 2 of them on that drive. And it was exactly what you wanted to see between Derrick Henry and Lamar, even though didn't seem to be much push and much room for Derrick Henry to go to on some of those. And so you're like, all right, this is the way it's going to be. So we had 5 on the first drive and then 8 the rest of the way. And that's not my concern after this game. This game, because of how you just outlined it, that they were behind. And so in the second and fourth quarters, you're not going to be able to feature Derrick Henry the way you want to. So I'm not panicking about his snaps, but the way they used them and formations and all that, it's the predictability and how you marry Lamar and Derrick Henry. I think those things I'm more concerned about than his snap count at this point.
Right. Well, one of the things that came up this summer, and I had the chance to ask Monken about this when he was at the podium, was what they'd seen out of Derrick Henry against live fire, or what evidence they have that he can handle the mesh point with Lamar, because Lamar's got to be able to pull the ball late. That's what makes Lamar great. And Mark Ingram and he had a great rapport with that. And I'd say that Gus Edwards and he had a lot of trouble with that, even when Gus was very effective, and Lamar was too in 2018, but it got a lot better over the years until Gus was very adept at doing that. It's not an automatic thing, and it's something that Derrick Henry may or may not understand how to run with a really loose cage. And Derrick Henry may or may not be amenable on some level, even subconsciously, to allowing a late pull. He may really not like it.
Because he's used to getting it.
Because he's used to getting it. And you know what? You don't have to be Derrick Henry. Zay Flowers looked like on the play where he had the big run last year against the LA Chargers that he should have gone down, but he ran for a touchdown on 4th and something. Weaved all over the field, went in the end zone. That play, he was not letting Lamar have that ball back no matter what. There was a read play, and he was not having it.
Yeah,
it kind of snatches it away from Lamar. It's no longer a mesh play. So anyway, I was fairly happy with how that worked. You're absolutely right. In the second and fourth quarter, in particular, when the Ravens had the ball within 2 minutes, there's no opportunity for Henry there. Kind of unfortunate Henry as a receiver had no role, and kind of unfortunate Henry, the pass blocker, had no real role in this game.
What was his role in Tennessee in those 2 regards? Do you know? I just remember him running it down, the Ravens' throats. So it's hard for me to remember what he was doing as a pass rusher and a pass protector.
A pass protector, he's always been one of the best in the league, and it's a matter of size. But I mean, he's got in his career.
I said rusher. He's not on defense. I meant as a pass receiver.
He's got 155 career receptions in his last 2 years in Tennessee, at 33 and 28. So pretty significant amounts. His yards per target 2 years ago was 9.7, which is Amazing for a running back. And then it was only 5.9 last year, which is more normal, I would say. Career 7.1, by the way, is excellent for a running back. So he's been a guy they've relied on him for.
So he can do it. Yeah. I mean, I assumed he could, but I just didn't know what the usage was. Okay.
Hopefully he'll be someone they can really lean on as that goes in. And Lamar, the thing I loved about Lamar in this is how angry he played. And it was in part. By the way, love to see Lamar get angry on the sidelines and rip into his offensive line if they're not getting the job done. I'm happy about that. If he wants to do that to receivers, one guy who I think is capable of lots of excuse making, and I hate to single him out in this thing, but I think it's really true, is Bateman. I think he's capable of lots of excuse making. If Lamar and Hay went at it sometime this year at Lamar's starting it, I would be very in favor of that. I'd be even more happy if they just develop a connection and it works and everything's
right. That's the optimal one. But if it doesn't work, you'd like to see Lamar get after him the way he's gotten after the offensive line.
Yeah. So
Lamar playing angry. Yeah. Defiance, another word I would use, especially post game. I thought Likely and Lamar were very defiant, even with things like, and they've been torn apart for this. Lamar saying, "Oh, I think that's still a touchdown," and Likely saying, "Oh, well, if that's the best they can give, then good luck to them in the postseason." Right? It was like factually untrue. Like Chiefs are going to get better too, and it wasn't a touchdown. But it's this attitude that you're kind of speaking to, angry Lamar, right? Vocal Lamar. We've got skinny Lamar back, but we also have vocal Lamar along with skinny Lamar. And I like the defiance. I like the change from saying the Chiefs are my kryptonite to no, they're not. I hated it when he said that. And I was like, please, don't say that, Lamar. It's because it's a mindset. And so, what I also liked about it though, Ken, is he wasn't just angry. I felt like he was very in control. The only time I didn't like angry Lamar is when he was dropping the shoulder. It was like, I appreciate the attitude, but just run out of bounds, like in those types of situations. Outside of that, he just was letting the Chiefs know, I'm here, and you're going to see a different Lamar than you saw last time. But I felt like he was very in control. I thought every time he went to the line of scrimmage, he was checking things out. He was putting everybody in the right position. He didn't seem frantic. He didn't seem panicked. And then when he went to the offensive line, that was in control. Like he would talk to them and yell at them, and then he comes back out, but he doesn't. I mean, there was a couple times maybe he had one read and then he'd run, right? And that was later on. But I just felt like he was very in control. And for the most part, not all the time, but for the most part, I loved his decision making. And sometimes when you play emotional with anger, you make bad decisions. But I felt like Lamar played within himself, making good decisions, getting people in the right place, knowing when to run, when not to run, taking what the defense gave. I felt like he overall did that. And so I loved this version where it was like a controlled anger to let them know he was there, but very in control.
I think you're exactly right. And it's a very focused anger. And the kind of thing I don't like to see on the field, and I don't think anybody likes this, I don't think it's a surprise, is Lamar angry over delay of game calls. Now in this game, he got pissed off because the center didn't deliver the football. Very loud environment, difficult environment. By the way, that penalty probably could have been charged to Linderbaum. And as I scored the offensive line, I didn't do it, but it's something where the environment just didn't make it easy, but also Lamar has to share some of the burden for not getting everybody to the line of scrimmage as quickly as he otherwise could, get that snap off within a reasonable amount of time. But when he's done that before, and in particularly when he's punted the football after a delay of game has been called, that is the thing that really irks me behaviorally about Lamar. It's the one thing. Now, a lot of people are pissed off about Lamar being a continual jokester on the sidelines. Like there's sometimes you just shouldn't be smiling during a game. Player has his own personality. Okay. I prefer somebody who's continually intense about football on the sideline for 3 hours who can maintain that. But if you can't do that, that's okay. He's Lamar Jackson. He's the greatest athlete, and we're lucky to have him. But if I would prefer, and I think it conveys a better attitude, if he can be continually focused in his football on the sideline. And there's little things that show up from time to time. And, picking up that female cameraman a couple of years ago because he knocked her over. This guy, a nice thing, human, interesting.
Right.
Worry about football, Lamar. Worry about football.
No, I like that he picked her up for sure. I think he did that this game. I think if he could replicate what he did this game without lowering the shoulder too much, I want to see that replicated. He was definitely intense, defiant, angry, but in control for the vast majority of the game. And I think that's the Lamar we want to replicate every week.
Right. And it was, I do think, I agree with Collinsworth's opinion on the thing that it's a special game when they were playing the Chiefs. No matter what they say about this game not mattering, this was personal to Lamar, and Lamar wasn't really of a mind to do less of the running. Tim Tebow, by the way, when he had his magic four to 6 game run there, basically had one game where he went in with about 4 minutes late, and he goes into the game from a timeout at the sideline, and he turns to the head coach, and they say, I think the head coach, not the offensive coordinator, but doesn't matter really which, and says, nobody's running the ball but me. I just felt like that's where we were right now with Lamar Jackson in this situation.
I'm with you. I'm with Collinsworth. I would be surprised. I think one of the biggest knocks on Lamar in the AFC Championship game, outside of throwing into the triple coverage on the interception, was that he didn't run. Now, we learned right before the game from that Washington Post article that he was banged up. And so perhaps he wasn't doing it because he was banged up. I thought it was, at the time, an extension of what he'd done all season, which is that, play would break down and he'd have a lane. He's like, nope, I'm just going to scramble some more, but I'm still keeping my head up. I'm going to try to throw it. And then it was awesome to see throughout the year. But then once you hit that AFC Championship game, it was like, well, this is a different level and it's not working. So run, and so my point is he may be able to, the scrambles and the chunks of yards he would get, it's what we said. They were gassed for a reason. They were running after Lamar forever. And so by the fourth quarter, they couldn't do it anymore. So against the Chiefs, I think that's what you have to do. You do whatever it takes to beat them. He may have a little bit more leeway against other opponents where he doesn't have to go out and put his body on the line or go scramble and go and pick up those chunks. And then he can sit back in the pocket more. And so I'm with Collinsworth. We all could be wrong, but my guess is that they're going to try to establish Henry more. They're going to try to establish him sitting in the pocket longer. But I think that they had learned a lesson that it was like against the Chiefs, you do what you got to do. You put on your Superman cape and do what you got to do. You may not have to put the cape on as much, say, next week against the Raiders or some other people, but against the Chiefs, you do. Yeah. We hope. That's what we're all projecting, and maybe we're projecting it because we're hoping it.
And by the way, if you're out there and you're one of the people who says Lamar Jackson needs to have a 4,000-yard season, damn it, because basically he was on pace for 4,600 yards after, I think that's about right, after a game like that.
He had like 395. Yeah.
No, hold on. The 273 passing is what I'm talking about.
Oh, you're talking about passing. Okay.
We do not want that kind of game. That's not the kind of game. We want the 185 rushing yards is fine, but the other team needs to not have the ball very much, which they didn't in this game. They need to not be moving the ball. They need to not have the lead. The Ravens need to score more touchdowns. Basically, we want Lamar not to have to pass, which has been why he's never had 4,000 yards in a season. It's a good thing. Embrace it, folks. We definitely do not want to play 17 games like this for a lot of reasons. But one is it could potentially 17 losses. It's certainly going to be 17 close games. And second of all, it means the Ravens are going to be trailing a lot of the season, that's not the Ravens football.
I want to get your opinion on this because we talked about him running around, gassing out the defensive line for the Chiefs, right? Absolutely phenomenal. JT Sullivan did this film breakdown of Lamar, and I watched the full hour twice. And he pointed out Lamar's mechanics. He was like world class in that first quarter. He's like, the way he drops back, he's not clicking his heels. It's like 3-step or 5-step drop. And then his base is wide. He's low. And then like he would deliver like on that, I think it was a play action to Zay Flowers. He's like, he just a dart right in there. Just beautiful. He's like, this is beautiful. He's like, if we got this combined with his athleticism and his scrambling and everything else, he's like, he will be unstoppable. And then you could see JT kind of pointed out as the game went on, okay, it wasn't as good here in the third quarter. Okay. And then you get to the fourth quarter and he's like, this is just bad mechanics. And then JT paused. He was like, I don't know if it's because of the workload he's had, which is, I said that to my husband the other night. I was like, is it possible? Like when people talk about his accuracy, it's like we've seen accurate throws. We've seen it. But then is it going down? Because you think about it, if a wide receiver has a big chunk play, they go to the sideline and somebody else comes in for him. If a running back has a big chunk play, they go to the sideline, somebody else comes out for him. Lamar has a chunk play. He's back there and he's directing everything. You'd think that his accuracy might go down a little bit because of that. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is because Chris Jones keeps coming and he's going back and forth, he's not as comfortable as he was in that first quarter where he hasn't been, hit or running for his life 1,000 times, whether it's a combination of those things or something else. There's no doubt that his mechanics and his accuracy deteriorated throughout the game.
That bears watching. I'll say that it's an interesting observation. I would say it's certainly if JT is drawing that causal connection, I'll say it bears watching. He's extremely knowledgeable. I trust him, and I'd love to just continue to watch that and see if that's breaking down. But it's at least good that he was starting the game with good mechanics. The results were not great. Even with good mechanics, that's the problem. You had a nice throw to Flowers, but most of the first drive was the ad-libbing or the getting out of the pocket to Justice Hill and getting the ball up the field on 2 third downs, and then the runs by Henry and a couple scrambles by him as well. So I can't really.
There were designed runs on there too that were really effective.
Okay, I'm with you. I'm just saying if we're talking passing mechanics, I'm just saying I can't put too much on that one play in terms of that. So I'd like to.
Which one play are you talking about?
The play to Flowers in the first drive.
Oh no, he showed plenty of them where he had great mechanics. The Flowers was one of many.
Okay,
like he was like pointing out many times. That's what I was saying. Like it was throughout the game, like throughout the first quarter, all the mechanics were all great, and he's raving about it. And then second quarter still pretty good. Third quarter not as great, and then fourth quarter it was just like not. I mean, it was just bad.
Okay,
mechanics.
It
wasn't one play.
He's one of the few people that would actually watch it. I trust him to get the trend right. There's other people who show clips and they want to try and create a narrative first and then show the clips to support it second.
Right.
And it's easy to find that.
For sure. You can find one play to back up any narrative.
Of anything. And that's why, in particular, offensive line scoring, every play is right on display. Don't go to individual clips, create a system, score it out. It's not that much work. Just do the real work to
it's work, Ken. You work hard to do that. It is work.
I mean, we spend 2.5 hours doing it and going through the entire game, scoring every play with fairly significant detail. And I think that people probably spend almost that much time putting together the individual clips to put out on Twitter. Look, I saw this and he got his hands involved and blah, blah, blah. It's just, it requires that. Quarterback mechanics are the same. They're on display every single passing play. So don't try and show me 4 plays of in a row. And I'm glad to hear that JT had more than that.
It was 60 minutes of Lamar alone, just 60 minutes, but it was very, very, very thorough. Yes. All
right. Let's move on here because we're doing what we always do and having a fun football conversation. But you should be talking about football and going through the office here. Right. Let's talk about a couple of things that happened to Lamar in the passing game. The first, the Chiefs rushed 6+ on 4 occasions. Beautiful, beautiful job of having 7 block 7 and create an ATS opportunity. That happens almost never. Okay, and I'm talking about in the entire time I've been scoring ATS, it's maybe happened 3 or 4 times. That a 7-man rush has been absolutely stonewalled for an ATS opportunity. And that's exactly what happened, and likely out there for a nice easy pitch and catch. It's kind of almost amazing. It only went for 15 yards, but it was on the towards the left sideline after a long play. So they kept 2 guys in. They only had 3 in the pattern, and likely is out there in a lot of space on the left side, and they got him 15 yards. I love to see that when it occurs. It's not a common occurrence, but the Ravens did a good job in this game. And that was early. That was before they were completely gassed. That was in the first half that they got that opportunity.
Walk me through more of your ATS numbers here. This looks
Okay, sure.
Very interested in all of this.
Yeah, so let me
Before I
talk through.
comment. Yeah.
Sure. So the offensive line generated 15 ample time space opportunities, 36%. That's higher than normal. Normal would be maybe in the high 20s. Mahomes had, I want to say 26% in this game, might have been 29. So Lamar had more ATS opportunities than Mahomes did. 9 of 15 for 112, 7.5 yards per pass. That actually is not that good. For the production for the ATS opportunities is not that good. So that's not where Jackson shined in this game. Probably cost the Ravens about 20 to 25 yards on those plays. Probably 20, I would say, on those plays.
Okay.
And then another 5 yards or so on the ball out quicks, which were 13 of those, 31% of the time. He went 12 for 13 on the plays, but it was only for 74 yards. And I think that it was like one play that was almost all of the BOQ yards. Let me go to it. That's not entirely true. But there's one play for 17 yards. Everything else was under 10. So it wasn't like they broke the bank on getting the ball out quickly. A lot of the plays that were short throws to the outside of Flowers in particular fall into this category and were not real special plays. But 5.7 yards per play cost the Ravens about 5 yards on that. Okay, so a little bit worse than average. Probably I'd normally assume 6 yards per play on those would be normal.
Okay.
Another 14 pressure events they allowed. Now, first of all, one of the real things you want to look at is how many ATS and how many pressure events you allowed. Any game where your offensive line allows fewer pressure events than ATS opportunities granted is a good one.
Right. Sorry, my son just walked in. Go ahead.
Okay.
He didn't realize. He didn't realize it's a Saturday night that I'm recording. You can text me, bud.
There you go. So anyway, anytime you have more ATS and pressure opportunities created by the offensive line, that's a good thing. Now, it's a slightly spurious number because Lamar ran the offensive line out of 7 pressures in this game, which is also probably the highest total I've ever seen. So highest I can ever recall.
So the 7 does not count a part of that 14?
That's correct. So the 40, If you look at the number 42, that's all his pass attempts, 41 passes plus 1 sack. But he had 7 other scrambles that were, I'm sorry, he had 9 other scrambles, but 7 of them he left a dirty pocket. He left a pocket that pressure had been created.
Right.
And so that is, the 15 to 14 does not tell the whole story. It's more like 21 to 15 is more like normal. But since I've been looking at it this way the whole time, I'd say that's still a pretty good relationship between those two things.
So basically, if you didn't run out of them, you're saying it would be if it's not Lamar, if it's another quarterback, it would have been 21 pressure situations, pressure events.
If he couldn't scramble for a positive yard on any of those and got sacked instead, say, or threw the ball away.
And you're saying 21 to 15 is normal?
21 to 15 is probably like it's a high number of both, but that kind of relationship 7 to 5 might be about normal.
Okay.
I like 35 and 25.
So the ratio is normal, but both are high.
Yeah. 35 to 25% might be very normal for an NFL game. 35% pressure and 25% ATS. So pretty normal. And obviously the major caveat with that is that not that Lamar ran him out of pressure a lot, but which he did, but that the defensive line was very gassed towards the end of the game and wasn't getting a lot of pressure. And you can really see the ATS opportunities piling up in the fourth quarter. But then I made the point that Lamar cost the Ravens about 25 yards on the ATS and BOQ opportunities. But when they had pressure, he was 5 of 13, which doesn't sound good, but it's for 81 net yards. There's only the 1 sack in there. 5.8 yards per pass is actually excellent for those. And he probably gained the Ravens back at least those 25 yards on that. Did have a turnover on there. So in total, he was right on par with his opportunity set. Not over, not under, just on par from a passing perspective with what opportunity set he had. But those scrambles added incredible value to this game. Just incredible value. To have 7 times you run out, he had a large number of first downs, but the big number that I come back to is the FNTP number. Now that's of my own design. It's forced not to pass. Okay. So when it's a non-designed run, a scramble, you add those results to the sack results. So he had a sack for -6, and he had 9 scrambles for 70 in the game for a combined 10 for 64. That's 6.4 yards per play when he was forced not to pass. Think about how demoralizing that is, the defense. You force a guy not to pass and he still averages 6.4 yards per play. Lamar in his MVP season in 2019, 5.1 is the highest ever, basically, of any quarterback. So Very rare that you have quarterbacks that are over about 1.5 to 2. They're only the very top scramblers are in that range.
Well, another way to look at that, I was looking at PFF. They have a graph here that I'm looking at with dropback outcomes. Dropback, so a little bit different from what you're talking about, but dropback. So you have 57 dropbacks, and they do this with right next to Patrick Mahomes. So on 1.8% of his dropbacks, he was sacked.
Mm-hmm. Right,
Patrick Mahomes, by the way, only had 33 dropbacks, like almost half, almost half, and he was sacked 6.1% of the time, so much higher. They both have about the same amount of throwaways. Lamar's 3.5%, Mahomes 3%. And then the scramble is where it's massively different.
They had him for 9 scrambles for PFF.
They don't give me a number; they give me a percentage. So the percent of 57, they have him at 17.5.
That's interesting. That means they have him for 10 scrambles there, and that would be only 9. That's interesting because somebody else I saw had him for 10 scrambles. I used the PFF number, which was 9, and that would make it even better for Lamar in terms of the additional yardage. But worth noting. Yeah,
and then so Patrick Mahomes, he scrambles more than maybe an average quarterback, so he's at 6.1. Then we have batted passes. Lamar had 7%. Patrick Mahomes had 0. Yep. So in terms of like actually targeting somebody, Lamar was only at 70.2%, and Mahomes was at 84.8%. And a massive amount of that comes from those scrambles.
Yeah,
where it gets taken away.
It's obviously not good to have that occur, but it's redraw value you get from Lamar. Lamar does want to pass the ball. He wants to find an open receiver.
He does. He's been saying that forever. Yes.
But the redraw value, the forced not to pass number of 6.4 yards per play that's incredibly valuable. And it really overshadows the passing statistics in a lot of ways, because that normally might be 1 for a lot of quarterbacks.
Well, that brings me to kind of, I've got 2 different roads I want to go down with this 6.4 yards per play. So I was listening to ESPN Get Up, Dan Orlovsky, and Taylor Lewan. I've really got to figure out how to say his name, but Derrick Henry's former teammate, offensive lineman. He used the words identity crisis for the Ravens. Crisis is a little strong for week 1, but he's getting a point across about how you use Derrick and Lamar together. Okay. And so with kind of to your point, what Dan was saying was like, Todd Monken's going to have to be extremely patient, because with Derrick Henry, it's kind of like death by 1,000 cuts. Like the more attempts he gets, the more you're going to, demoralize the defensive line, and he's just going to get better. He needs at least 20 or more carries to do that. And you want to do that, but he wasn't getting a ton of yards per carry. Meanwhile, when you go with Lamar, whether it's scrambling or, an RPO or a read or whatever, you don't need a death by 1,000 cuts. You could just like get this big chunk of yards right here. And so Dan Orlovsky was like, what's Monken going to do? Are you just going to, be patient and just keep giving it to Henry and not use this dynamic playmaker in Lamar? Or are you going to be patient and just try to do this death by 1,000 cuts instead of Lamar just knocking him out really quick? And so I wanted to get your opinion on that. Like, how do you see those 2 things coming together? And again, was this week just an anomaly?
I'll answer the second part first. I think, yes, it's just an anomaly.
Sure.
The first part of the question is more complex, but I'll say this. Going into this game, the greatest weapon on either side of the field, for either offense, was the Lamar Henry mesh point. As soon you don't have to actually go into the mesh point. What was that? I'm sorry. That was a signaling family member here.
I have glass doors on my office, and my daughter is going to bed, and she signed to me, "I love you." Okay. And so I said, "I love you too." And
I'm sorry. I thought you were agreeing with my point.
Only. No, we're audio only. So I was thinking that like I could do that to her, and maybe you would know it was a kid. Sorry.
I'll leave it.
I usually just talk when I want to talk. I won't give you any hand signals. So
the production that goes on behind the screen, the production values of this are there's some weird stuff going on. But anyway, the Lamar Henry mesh point is the biggest offensive weapon either team had. And they don't have to actually go to the mesh point to do that. They have to have the threat of the mesh point, which keeps linebackers running downhill. It keeps the Chiefs tightening up around the box and trying to make sure that they don't let Henry get free. And it creates all kinds of play action opportunities that we did not see in this game. We did not see play action.
Totally agree. Yeah.
And so that's one of the big things I think that they'll go to more. I think that's the underutilization of Henry that I'm actually concerned about. Mm-hmm. I'm not concerned. He'll get more carries in other games. He's going to run all over people. Sure. And he doesn't need to carry the ball 20 times a game. You want to wear down the opponent, but you can wear down the opponent with Jackson, with continual first downs. I mean, it's basically consecutive snaps played on the field, tire an opponent. I actually think if Henry, one plausible use of Henry is you bring him in for 5 carries in the first half and 12 in the second. And I think you get a really high value out of those 12 second half carries.
Right.
If you're going to carry him 17 times a game. Yeah.
If you're ahead. Yeah. Yeah. But that's the problem. Like, that's what makes me kind of nervous, though, is like, this was your big free agent signing and he doesn't have an impact when you're behind, or he has less of an impact when you're behind.
Oh, sure.
That's the unfortunate part. Okay. So you don't see like an issue of like kind of like this idea you have these speedsters and you kind of want to have a spread offense, but then when you have in Derek, you might want to like I saw in your notes, maybe I'm jumping ahead, the Ravens didn't want to commit the blockers to be like power and get things open for him. And so if they're not willing to do that, is that going to be a problem?
I appreciate you asking the question, by the way, but to me, they really underutilized Ricard in this game too. He only had 19 snaps of 74 offensive. So it's not like they were really set up to run against the Chiefs. I think they're kind of went into this game deciding they were going to run out of 11 personnel, try and loosen up the Chiefs boxes, which by the way was not the case necessarily in the first half. The Chiefs were still very heavily defending the run, and they did a pretty good job of containing Henry. And I think that the Ravens, the AFC Championship game, they totally defended the run and put the game in their hands, the cornerback, and Lamar couldn't beat them.
Right.
So we saw a little bit more of that, early on in this game, although Henry did a good job on the offensive line, first of all, had one extremely well blocked play to get Henry the 5-yard touchdown. I don't know if you saw it, but Falele in particular had a great block on that play. But other than that, I would say Henry was fighting for his life. He converted the 4th down late in the game where he was caught in the backfield. And that was the ball.
Yeah, because Rosengarten ran a different play from everybody else. He went to pole to the right, and he let 91 come through. I don't think Rosengarten knew what he was doing on that play. The Ravens got lucky because when he went to pole, he let 91 through, who touched Derek in the backfield, but Derek converted anyway. That was crazy.
I need to go back and look at that play. I definitely need to go back and look at that play. But that was it obviously meant the ball game at that time if they had been stopped.
Yep.
I mean, I do not think we've seen the only personnel grouping that the Ravens will show all year. I think we'll see a lot more of the heavies because I think that's where a lot of the Ravens talent is. The Ravens talent at tight end between Kolar, Ricard, and Anderson Likely, of course, is where a lot of the offensive talent is. They don't have a
and Henry
wide receiver and Henry. He's going to be.
Guy. Yeah.
The one thing I'll guarantee about the Ravens is they'll be extraordinarily close to 1.0 running backs per play. I can't tell you exactly how many tight ends and OL6s and other things they'll use. They'll use but they'll be very, very close to 1.00 running backs
on the
play.
Running backs.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. A couple more things I want to pick up on here. Let's go back to Lamar. 3.01 time to throw, seconds to throw is good. That means Lamar was having his way, kind of moving around the pocket, meandering, making throws eventually. One of the kind of disappointing things is he's still not making very many on-schedule throws. So we're not seeing Bateman's route running manifest itself in opportunity as often as it should. Bateman had a nice comeback route that was deep and actually was more time. I don't think it was a really carefully timed up route. And it's just the nature unfortunately, of Lamar versus Bateman that Lamar does not bring out the best in him because the route.
Yeah, no, like Lamar's like a street ball football and Likely knows how to do that. Mark Andrews has known how to do that. Zay Flowers is good at it.
Yep.
Seems like Aguilar seemed to have it and Bateman just is not. And it's just too bad because we know what a technician Bateman is as a route runner. And so if it were more on schedule, I'm sure it would benefit him more. But not only that, I thought there was one play, and again, I'm going to cite JT Sullivan, and maybe I'm doing it too much, but I just watched him and I thought he was fantastic. But we talk about on schedule throws. He had missed Andrews in the end zone. It really would have reminded me of like one of those either Dennis Pitta or Anquan Bolden, where it was just unstoppable. Like Joe would just drop back and just go. It would be right down the middle, but he'd float it up over. Because they got in the end zone, they'd get over, depending on the safety look and all that. And Andrews was there, and that was actually the play where Lamar ended up running to the right, and then he had to throw it like last minute. He was able to throw it away, and he was out of the pocket, so it didn't count as an intentional grounding. But Andrews was open for a touchdown on that one, but it had to be like on schedule, on time, just get it, just drop back, throw, and so. Yeah, I agree that there's still that opportunity. And that's what Steve Young had told us when he came on our shows. That was like the next step for Lamar, just doing a bit more of the on-schedule stuff, because we know he's Superman with the off-schedule stuff, but he could help himself out by just getting some of these open, the things that are open right away, and he just drops back, hits it, layup right there.
Steve Young is exactly on the money there. We talked about it pretty much all season, that it doesn't take Lamar to totally change his game. It'll take 4 to 6 throws per game, even 4 throws per game that are on schedule would completely change how they have to advance scout for Lamar. It would, it'll drive opposing defensive coordinators crazy to all of a sudden have to worry about Bateman, worry about what's going on over there. And, the Chiefs, they picked the Ravens apart in terms of what they did with on-schedule throws in this game. In particular, the slant routes were incredibly effective against the linebackers. They did also have a lot of pick and rub routes off bunch formations that were, they're not timed throws in the same way, but they're choice routes that are created off one particular bunch. So it's really Mahomes knows exactly what he's looking for on that. He knows when it's going to happen. So in a sense, it is timed, even though it's not timed out of a break the way it is for a Bateman on a lot of his route running stuff. They just killed the Ravens on that, and that should be something that Lamar and Monken should be forced to watch together and say, hey, what can we take from this? There's do we want to run more bunch? Do you want to use these concepts with Bateman in terms of getting it open anyway? A kind of frustrating in that respect, but Steve Young's, as one would expect, is exactly on the money with that with that comment. All right. Let's see. Hill outsnapped Henry 43-37 for the game. Little bit amusing. Have you heard anybody else talking about that in terms of? Oh my, look what they're doing here. Henry can't be happy.
There's definitely articles, especially out of Tennessee, that was like, well, why did Henry go to the Ravens for this? 13 carries, this and that. Again, the snaps aren't what worries me. Although, it only worries me if they become predictable. Mm-hmm. Okay. So because we're here talking about schemes and formations. Emory Hunt pointed this out. Let me see if I want to make sure I get this right. So Emory Hunt said this on CBS HQ. So he was nervous about it being predictable with personnel and formation, because he said in shotgun, Derrick Henry is running sidecar and he's not getting the ball. In pistol or under center, that's when Derrick Henry got the ball. And so he feels like that's part of the reason why they couldn't get the ground game going, is because the defensive line for the Chiefs could tee off. They're like, oh, this is how they're lining up. Now I know Derrick's not getting the ball, or he is here or there. So I just want to be careful that, if Henry is good at, put him in on third down and let him catch out of the backfield, or let him do pass protection and all that. Or, he's got to do some stuff in shotgun, stuff like that, so that they're not becoming too predictable. Again, it's just one game, so maybe Monken will change it up, but it's less the snaps that I'm worried about and more about the predictability.
Okay. A couple things about that. First of all, that was a big question this offseason, is whether or not Henry was going to be able to run from sidecar, use the mesh point that way. Mm-hmm. When you have a pistol mesh point, what that does is that changes where Lamar's is the run threat. And Lamar, in the years between 2019, complete pistol, So they ran something like 46% pistol that time. Might have been 46% of the run plays were at a pistol, but anyway, it was a very high percentage of pistol they ran. And basically Lamar turns to one side, left or right, and he can get that wrong sometimes, but he turns left or right, puts the ball in the mesh, and then he's a threat to the outside, and Mark Ingram or whoever was carrying the ball, then Gus Edwards, whoever it might have been, is a threat to go directly up the middle. But under the sidecar method, the back is the threat to the outside, and it's typically done with a speedier back. But Henry is a reasonable alternative for that. He's got decent speed, and if he gets to the outside, he's going to be facing a smaller player, which is of course what you always want for him. But it changes Lamar. It changes Lamar to being a middle threat. And we saw some of his really big touchdown runs during those years, 2021, 22, and even into 23, that were out of sidecar. And he has a much broader area to take the football. But he chooses a lane in the middle for a lot of those runs. And I don't think his overall run yards per play were necessarily gaudily better during those years, but it does provide him a lot more options on what he can do. Some of it may be Lamar's choice that he really wants to run more sidecar than pistol, but the Ravens ran more under center than they had. I think it was a very, very small number, like 5 times they ran from under center. 5 times they were under center, not 5 times they ran from under center. And I think we're going to see a variety. I do think we're going to see a fair amount of pistol this year.
Yeah.
All right. Let me continue on. There's only one other thing I think I really want to talk about, and that is the Ravens really committed a lot of their receiving resources to set blocking in this game. So it's another caveat for the offensive line, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is they used 21 set blockers in this game and 6 chip blockers. That's 27 total, 0.64 per pass play, which is, you get 5 eligible receivers, folks. 0.64 per pass play given up is 13% of your eligible receivers given up on in terms of this. So you have to kind of put it as a percentage, I think. And when you have 21 set in particular, all of those, they can't even chip and go out for a play. The chip blockers at least have a limited set of routes where they can help as a delayed exit from the backfield. Very significant commitment. I do think it was effective in this game. We saw Hill at the end of the game, but we saw other players during the game, including the 7-man rush that they stopped. And it's just, I believe that will not continue. I don't believe other teams are going to try and rush Lamar Jackson with numbers on a regular basis. And I think that will probably not happen again.
This wasn't by design, because it was a Lamar improvising, but the play where Isaiah Likely got that 49-yard touchdown, Zay Flowers had a sweep block on it.
Yep, sure did.
So they were getting a lot of these guys, blocking. Andrews, I felt like wasn't the best at blocking. There was I shouldn't say it wasn't the best. There were 2 or 3 plays that I saw that it was like, okay, we got to up our blocking game here, Andrews. But Kolar, I think, does it well. And but it was cool to see Zay and a few of these guys get in on that.
All right. Very cool. So, Sarah, it is such a pleasure to be talking football with you again. And you told me about an interesting vacation. I don't know if you want to talk about that in the second part of the show, but we'll be back. But before we do that, before we take our break, tell folks where they can find your work or talk to you online if they'd like to.
Yeah. So Bobby Trossett and I do our podcast and YouTube channel called The Vault. So you can find that pretty much on any platform. And we do Monday through Friday, we do a live noonday show. We've turned that into a live show at noon. And then we also do live post-game shows. And then Bobby on his own does a pregame show. So check out The Vault. And then also I'm on Twitter at SG Ellison. All
right. Awesome. It goes without saying, and I know most of you people, if you haven't been living under a rock, know who Sarah is by now, but one of the most passionate football fans you'll ever find, and very centered, I find. Like if you want to talk after a game about something that's upsetting you, she's a fine person to find your focal point again, to calm you down maybe a little bit. But anyway, always appreciate talking football with you, Sarah. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a Film Study Short, hit me up. DMs are always open on Twitter. Really want to encourage people to use hashtag Film Study Mailbag for these shows during the year in particular. We're trying to get to some questions. every time, and also for Friday Morning GM. So there's a lot of questions that come up with in terms of roster management. The strange decision, for example, to deactivate Brent Urban is something I'm sure we're going to be talking about this Friday, and other questions about the roster that come up or salary cap. That's the place to hit us up. Sarah, thanks again for coming on.
Appreciate it.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.